It's time to let you in on a little secret. Actually, lots of secrets. We're talking strategy and, most importantly, return on your investment for your podcast. Welcome to Branded Podcast Secrets. All right, welcome to another episode of Branded Podcast Secrets. I'm your host, Erin Greger, here talking another podcast all about building businesses. And this one I'm particularly excited to talk about because there's one thing I do know a lot about. It's about farming, fortunately or unfortunately. But I have Michael Kilpatrick here. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're very excited to talk about your podcast, which is the Thriving Farmers Podcast. So Michael is a farmer, and he's an inventor. He's a speaker. And what he does is he helps other farmers streamline their business. And through the in the field consultants, that's all right. .coms. So your podcast is, like I mentioned, the Thriving Farmers Market. So Michael, I'd love to know a little bit about your history. I've read about it and how you came to farming. So can you talk a little bit about farming first, why you wanted to be a farmer, and now why you're helping other farmers build their businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always loved getting into the dirt. My parents have a picture of me when I was 6 with 15 different slugs crawling over my hands. And now that kind of creeps me out. But at that age, a 6-year-old boy, they're in that kind of stuff. But, as we got a little bit older, my dad decided to get into gardening with us. And so we got, the John Jevons book and the Victory Garden Kids book, and we started down that road and grew squash. And I remember at one point in my youth taking a wheelbarrow load full of cherry tomatoes and peppers and literally going to every neighbor on the street and saying, "Hey, you want any? Because we got extra." So that was way when I was younger. But as we grew older in 1999, we moved to upstate New York to get out of the city, try to avoid the whole Y2K thing. My dad was a little worried about it. So we bought 9 acres. And then we all woke up on January 1st and everything was fine. But what we did have was the 8 acres, and kind of no one told us we couldn't do it. So we started gardening and farming and raising ducks and vegetables. And the vegetables obviously for us became our niche. That was our niche. And so we just grew that. And so that grew to about 15, 16 acres. And we managed about 400 acres of property overall between that, doing farmers markets. That was until 2015. 2015, my wife and I decided to move to Ohio. We'd gotten married. We had a daughter. She wanted to be near her family. So we moved there. And so that is when we kind of, at that point, leased the business out. It was trying to make a creative situation for some of our managers who wanted to take over the farming system. Well, we watched them crash and burn spectacularly in just 8 months. And at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, these people literally had the perfect market. They had a hole in the market that they walked into. They had perfect soils. I mean, we had, again, 25 acres of tillable ground that they walked into with leases. They had dream equipment line, because I spent literally a decade getting an equipment line to dream of all the different pieces they could have ever wanted. And they had a great crew. I mean, we had a great crew that worked for me, and many of them just went on to work for them. So I was like, okay, so what was it that kind of made them fail? And then I started looking at other farmers around the country that were failing, and I was like, what the heck is causing those problems too? So, that's when we started in the field consultants, and because we were like, okay, here's a 5-step process that we have, or 5 pillars of success that we want to teach. So we started that company. We didn't start the podcast until about 2017. We're at about 150 episodes, I think, somewhere around there. And it's been one every single week. So what does that make it? 2018 then?
Wow. Yeah, I think you're at 154, I saw.
Okay, cool. So so that's 3 years worth of podcasts. So 3 years ago around this time we started, it's actually January when we started the podcast, I think around then. So, but yeah, that's kind of why we did farming. That's kind of why we started the educational side. It's just, we're tired of seeing farmers fail. And it kind of there's a huge problem. And let's talk about that problem, because only 5% of farmers make it to 5 years or more. And this year we started a new farm in Ohio here. Again, we kind of went off the deep end, scaled it fast, but it was interesting watching other people also start farms this year. And, there's one guy who's in Michigan, and he basically bought land that was uninhabitable house, tried to make it go of it. And there's interesting, a post he put out mid-season. Well, hey guys, we were kind of planning on the farm to pay our expenses and help us renovate the farmhouse, pay for us to renovate the farmhouse. And I was like, oh my gosh, you actually expected your farm in year one to actually give you income? In any business, you expect that the first year is going to be putting money into the business and not be taking money out. And then recently, literally today, I saw a post. Someone was saying, well, I, was hoping my farm was going to make me $650,000 this year. And year one. And I was like, I don't even know where to start here, dude. This is tough. But I think you've got a lot of people because, again, right now we're in incredible flux in this world. It's crazy. We can all agree with that. People are losing their jobs.
Yes.
People are changing jobs, all sorts of crazy things going on. And people decide, I plant a seed, it costs me 10 cents, and oh my gosh, I can sell those tomatoes off that plant for $4 a pound, and it'll give me 10 pounds of tomatoes, that's $40. Oh my gosh, look how much money I can make. And they don't realize everything else that goes into it. So that's why our podcast exists, to kind of share the stories and kind of give people a reality check sometimes of, what farming is all about.
Well, I love it. Like we talked earlier, so my dad actually, I'm very proud of him knowing those statistics. So and I think you're born for it. Like you said, you're in, you really have to have, I think, part crazy. Because not only are you a business owner, but it is a business owner like no other. Mm-hmm. You have so many literal outside
forces,
components that are changing your business. But he has been a farmer since, God, in his 20s, and the man is now 74, so 50 plus years, and very successful, like from a perspective of the fact that he's still standing and has done very well for himself from a farming, but he treated it very business-like. And I know we're not even talking about the podcast yet, but are you seeing, right now I feel like there's a lot of people trying to get off the grid, and in doing that, right, create their own farm. Are you seeing an influx of people trying to, like you said, losing a job, or saying, I want to, do this thing I've always dreamed of. Now is the time. Are you seeing an influx of people trying to get into farming, maybe at small scale, but trying to do that?
Yeah, we definitely are. It comes back to, as you said, people trying to get off the grid. People just trying to get onto the land and the homestead. But people saying, hey, I'm tired of the working for the man and I want to be my own boss. And I think there's a lot of success stories out there now, too. In the last 10 years, there's been obviously a huge growth in our industry. So there's a lot of people that saying, hey, here's how I'm doing it. Here's how you can do it. And, just showing that thing. Now, it is obviously a crowded industry. So you have to look at where, like for us, the type of farms we work with are typically small-scale organic farms. And the USDA is not really pushing that. They're pushing large-scale ag. So on one aspect, the deck is kind of stacked for the small-scale farmer. So it's pretty challenging. But again, if you treat it like a business, as you said, you can be quite profitable. It comes back to, how you manage it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you got a couple years into your business and then the podcast was born. I always love to know where you were in your business. Obviously you need to create some sort of content. What was it for you that you were like, I think a podcast is what we need to do?
Yeah.
And, why you chose podcasting as the medium.
Yeah. Well, the podcast came from my friends, Josh and Jill Stanton, who are well known in the digital space. The online marketing space. And I did a mastermind with them, and we were kind of like just breaking down like what were the challenges. And they're like, well, leads and, just getting my voice out there. And they're like, well, then do a podcast. And, I think the other aspect of the podcast is I love chatting with farmers and finding out about how their businesses work. And so basically it's, a selfish aspect of obviously I get to interview someone new and I get to learn about their business and deep dive into the challenges and the successes and how it makes it work. And then also give my feedback and kind of share some of my wisdom as well with some of these farmers, have a challenge they're trying to get solved. So, but yeah, that's kind of, I think, why we got it started, and then kind of it's taken on its own life. And as we kind of started at the beginning, it was very specific. We had a very specific list of questions. Now we've kind of opened it up, and it's kind of broadened a little bit to include, more than just farmers. So now it's like educators in the space. It's now software developers who are making stuff for farmers. It's tool inventors trying to hear the story behind the tools. So yeah, but it's still obviously very agricultural based. Where we haven't taken it, which I would like to, is start to go after more the business interviews, like the Donald Miller, the Good to Great Jim Collins. I'd love to get some of those folks. I mean, some of those are obviously very hard to get on, but some of those interviews I think could be really good for our audience because, again, we teach farmers business. And so that's for them to be able to get that kind of info.
Yeah, I mean, all it takes is one book launch of theirs, and they're all over the place, right? They'll easily come on.
Yeah, I'll just have to wait till the next time Jim Collins launches a book.
Yeah, it's not impossible. Let's just put it that way. So you said it kind of took a life of its own, and like I mentioned, obviously you've been doing this for 3 years. Something is working. Can you talk about what it has done for your business and how it's created that life of it that it has?
Yeah, I think obviously the biggest thing for us is it gives us a lot of credibility. We're probably the top 5 podcasts in our space. We almost have, I think we're at 750,000 downloads now. So we're getting close. We're starting to push toward that millionth download, which again,
that's amazing.
One of my heroes, Mike Rowe, he's 1 million downloads every episode. So but he's the
don't do that. Don't do that.
He's got a complete life of his own. I mean, I think what he's done too is he's kind of showcasing a lot of, some of our farmers and stuff, which is really cool. So, but I think the aspect of, so obviously the credibility, we use it to meet people. If we want to to form a affiliate relationship or a relationship with somebody, we have them on the podcast and just be able to kind of get a background in an interview and then be able to say, hey, matter of fact, let's chat about this relationship we can go for, or kind of how we want to set this up. So that aspect. And then I think just, again, getting in front of our audience on a weekly basis. So obviously ad revenue, but also being able to push our products. So when we do a product launch, 3 weeks advance, we're starting to talk about it, starting to push it, all that sort of stuff. So all that kind of stuff is important as we kind of move the business forward.
Yeah. So I know the demographics of a farmer have changed, right? And I would say they're probably not on social media, although nowadays I see farmers on TikTok doing videos, and it's crazy. How have you honed in on that demographic where you're marketing? Is it social media that's working for you, or are you doing different things to market the podcast because your demographic is a farmer, so you want to get how you're getting in front of them?
Well, obviously, it's also farmers that listen to podcasts, because not all farmers listen to podcasts. So, we try to get on as many podcasts as possible, because obviously that's where they're listening. Trade podcasts back and forth with different people. The other aspect would be, doing some advertising on social media. Our summits, though, are kind of our big aspect too. So we use our podcast to feed our summits, and we do a massive annual summit, which is our biggest event of the year, converts really well for us. But we also use those speakers to then, kind of share and expand our email list, which is then we push the podcast to them as well.
Interesting. Oh, keep going.
So yeah, I mean, basically that's another aspect. So we have an email list now about 85,000 people. And so obviously that's going out once a week to all those people as well.
Nice. Very nice numbers on those. Is the summit virtual, or are you doing it? Well, obviously it was virtual, but
we do.
Any plans of taking it in person?
It would be different. I mean, I'm more of a fan of these small, very small events, more high ticket, small events, just because you can actually really move people. The people that I really like working with they've already been in business for a couple of years, and so they just need to go to the next level. And so that's where we can actually solve problems. It's not what do I use for irrigation? It's okay, we've got irrigation, but now we just drilled a brand new well, and we're trying to figure out all the logistics of how big the pipe is and what makes sense for you, this, that, and the other. So that's kind of where I see my best use for, because obviously I can tell people, okay, this is how you plant this. But what really excites me, what really lights my fire is the kind of the business strategy, the moving from, the $50,000 in sales to the 500,000.
Yeah. Oh, so interesting. So, has the format, I always love to talk about this too, because a lot of people, again, you're so many episodes in, from the original plan of what the podcast was to what it is now, how is that transformed?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've done and we set up from the beginning is we wanted to make this super easy. Okay. So we have a booking calendar, which works with Calendly. It has Zaps going. It's got Airtable. It's got a waiver they sign, and obviously some email automations. But basically they book their time, and then the only thing we have to do on our end is just my team will do a little bit of stalking of their social media and then create like 6 or 8 personalized questions. So I'll use the roster I have of questions I normally use, and then I'll add in those 6 or 8 personalized questions. But yeah, it sends them the waiver automatically. They sign that. Then when they hit submit, it kicks them to another page, which asks them for their bio and their picture. So we created that system, and obviously it just works. And that's the only reason we're actually not off Zoom, because I hate Zoom with a passion. But is because none of these, like, you're using Riverside, and maybe it does, but most of these don't zap and can't connect with Calendly. And so that's so frustrating. Because again, we don't send anything. We don't send out any adverts or anything like that. It's all done automatically. And that's because Calendly interacts very easily with Zoom.
So interesting. So you sound like you pretty much have it all together. You got your systems down. Are you doing direct measurement from, like, the podcast generates X? Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that it's intertwining. You're doing the summit, marketing through it. But do you have anything in place that you generate for every 100,000 you generate? The podcast, you can directly correlate 20 of that or something along those lines. Do you have anything in place?
We don't. And, I think we were more organized. We would be, to the point of like for using it for sales, and like, hey, if you want to get this course at a discount, use this code. So, that's the kind of stuff we should be doing. We're not there yet.
I mean, you guys are pretty flipping far, though. So.
Yeah, we should be. I would like to be. That's actually something I think, it's on our thing. I feel like we're in this teenage stage where we could really go to this next level, and we just need to kind of like, sit down and like, do 6 things, and we would be at that next level. So, yeah, I think we know the best practices and just making so we implement them.
Yeah, and how are you finding both? It sounds like you've got a team, and I know this is a question a lot of people ask, is finding the guests and then finding the podcast to be on too, because it sounds like that's a pretty big strategy for you. Anything you're using or strategies you're finding that work really well in both of those? Yeah,
well, I think the one thing is we always are asking our guests for both of those, where we should be, getting onto, and also who they recommend. It's also, just searching Instagram by hashtag and then finding very specific farms. And then obviously there's people that pitch us all the time. And I've had horrible pitches and I've had great pitches. The best people are those that come to us and say, hey, based on this episode, that we can give you this very unique thing, and this is why it would be a good fit for your podcast. And I'm like, and then when they say, and we will be sure to make sure we promote you to our audience, boom, that's almost an automatic, yeah. But back to the guest, and again, we just, we reach out with usually through like Instagram or Facebook with a direct message and be like, hey, where can we send you more information? And then we'll follow up via an email and make sure they know it's coming so we don't get kicked to the spam bin. And then we go and send them the email and follow up back with social media to make sure they got it, make sure they saw it, make sure they're kind of gonna work on that.
I love that tip of going through Instagram or Facebook first to give them that heads up, so it's not ending up, like you said, in a spam bin or, just in that perspective. That's a really good tip. Anything else that you found that's worked really well on on the growth or, building of the podcast? Because, the guesting thing, the social media, the marketing, anything else you're doing from that perspective?
I mean, I don't say this is exactly like a thing. I think one of the things too is, though, you do have to take stands and do have to like put out your, again, don't be like divisive for divisiveness sake, but it's interesting that I've actually been kind of blacklisted on a few podcasts in our industry because I won't take the popular opinion on some things.
Ooh, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Any examples of this one?
Well, I'm just going to get straight. I basically was blackballed from having one of the leaders of our industry on, because his daughter wouldn't let him have it on because I was recording the episode. It was the day before. It was some Black Lives Matter something or other was going on. And I was just recording the episode. And she took offense that I was recording the episode around that time. And I was like, look, I'm not airing this episode. I'm not using this as a platform to say this stuff is not important. But the whole fact that I wasn't, just basically shutting down my life for a week because of that was very offensive to her. And so anyway, we haven't talked since. But I just thought that was really, and again, we're very inclusive. We've had people of all types, shapes, sizes, whatever's on our podcast. I mean, with 150 episodes, you kind of have to. But we're just open. We just want to hear all stories. We don't care. But it just was really interesting that actually was something that someone was so worried about that, they wouldn't let us there. Again, they wouldn't let someone else be on the podcast, much less themselves.
Wow.
But I guess what I would say about that is maybe we probably could have been a little bit more aware of the things that are going on in the world, and maybe I don't know. Again, sometimes you just have to let business be business.
Yeah, and I just feel like there's so many new rules that you have to allow forgiveness for people of not knowing them all.
Yes.
I know I'm completely naive to these new rules. I mean, I'm trying the best I can, and I'm asking the best questions I can.
Yes.
But I'm a small town girl from the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. There's a lot of things I'm still trying to wrap my head around. So I get that, but I love the standpoint too of this is a very opinionated field. There's a lot of passion behind it, right? And
I think you have to look at the audience. There's two, I think, and again, we know our avatar pretty well, but there's two main people that get into farming. People that, and it's interesting, is they're very typically political polar opposites. They get in because they want to save the world, and they're then very liberal. Or they get in because they want to get back to because they want to spend more time with their family. They want to feed their community, and they want to profit at farming because they see it as a profitable venture. And one aspect, a lot of those are Christians because they see the mandate to steward the earth, and they say, hey, I can steward the earth by being a farmer. So that's what we have is we got these two polar opposites in our industry, and so obviously you're never going to please everybody. For that matter, I do have a podcast coming out here in a week or so that's pretty divisive, and I'm sure it's going to, lose some members. One of the things I have been vocal about is, the government is not the small farmer's friend typically. And someone they took a lot of offense to that, and I am doing a podcast in rebuttal to that. Because, again, you can add to my resume now, I actually ran for, and now I'm an elected official in city council in our city. So, because I got fed up. Fed up with what was going on locally here. So I said, I'm going to run. And it was kind of evident, that people want to change because I got 20% of the vote in a 9-way race. So,
wow.
Again, it comes back to people want to change. And again, I ran on the thing of more freedom and less government in your lives. So it does help that we're in, very red state, Ohio. So that's a popular topic here. But I think it should be a popular topic with everybody, especially if you're living in the U.S. We're founded on freedom.
Yeah, no, we could have a whole nother pot. Just the regulations at play do not help the small farmer at all.
No.
In fact, my mom always takes massive offense to, how people talk about the treatment of animals and all this stuff. She's like, that's not true. I'm like, Mom, yeah, it is true, because you're looking at mostly huge farms that they are cattle, they are livestock.
Yeah.
No, most farmers don't have their cows named and can call them like we can.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not,
well,
because it focuses on the large farm
Yeah.
at hand. That's how it works.
Yeah, so you talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about the inventory readjustments that was happening during COVID, where they literally were sealing up the whole house. They would pump in steam and kill entire houses of chickens. And then people were like, oh, and pigs. And people were like, oh, no, it never happened. Oh, no, there is video of all of this. And they just tried to cover it up. But yeah, I mean, let's talk about that regulation, though. It's popped back down. Again, I don't want to belabor this, but I do think people need to understand
but this is the stuff. Yeah.
That the small farmer is not allowed, without a 20C kitchen, to process anything. So they can't make pickles. They typically can't make jams and jellies. Typically, they're not even allowed to, in Ohio, cut a head of lettuce to make a salad. That's called processing. So now you need all this further stuff. We actually set up our business a little differently. We set up our business as a private membership association. What that means that we're in the private domain, not the public domain. Obviously, there's a whole bunch we can get into, but what that allows us to do is do some more of this processing without having the government involved. If we hadn't been able to do that, we would not be in business. Because as we're looking through, this is the end, getting toward the end of the year, we're looking at like where our sales happened and what were our top 20 items. And believe it or not, we made more money on pickles than we did on cucumbers.
Interesting.
And that would have been illegal. And so what's happened is the government has made this equal playing field. If you look at, let's say, what it costs a small farmer to process a pig, it costs $250 to process a pig. It costs a big conglomerate $25. So right from the start, they're at a completely different level of basically regulation, because one size doesn't fit all. Again, it comes back to our town.
No.
Our town gave me the same rules they would have given a Walmart if a Walmart had wanted to move in. And actually, they would have probably been more friendly to a Walmart, because they knew that it would have created more jobs than literally me, who is going to create, maybe 10, 20, 30 jobs.
Right.
So, yeah, we can move on, but I think it's always interesting to let people understand just some of those aspects of how hard it is to be a small farmer.
And how important it is to go support your local farmers. I got this great shirt, there's a whole bunch. I was just in Montana, and all these support local farmer stuff. I just think it's so huge to understand that please go out of your way to go to the farmer's market. Please go out of your way to go to those places that do support local, because it really is important, because you're not supporting local by shopping at Walmart. No. It just, the meat there is not going to be from your local farmers. No,
and unfortunately, Walmart loves the greenwash so much. Like they say local, but when you dive into it, their definition of local is maybe 1,000 miles away, or maybe it's actually just because it's in the same state, which can be up to 500-600 miles away. So it's again, because local for a while there was people really were talking about it, and so obviously these big companies, their marketing machine is going to figure out how can we spin that.
Yeah. Well, Michael, I love what you're doing. I'm, even just where I grew up on a farm of like 1,000 acres, and it slowly dwindled down just because my dad had a hard time finding help.
Yeah.
And B, he's getting up there in age and just doesn't want to do. Every year he's like, I'm tired, I'm not doing this anymore. And then every year he comes back. He doesn't know how to not work.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, fortunately, I have his working genes, but the man still works harder than I do any day of the week. So I appreciate what you're doing, because I feel the farming life is dwindling down, but there is a need for it. And I know there's a lot of people who still want to do it. So if somebody wanted to learn more from you, I want to make sure we give them both websites, because I know you have one for the podcast and one for your company. Can you tell them where they should go? Yeah,
absolutely. So the podcast is thrivingfarmerpodcast.com. And then our main website where all our, umbrellas goes over is growingfarmers.com. So, if they do go to the In the Field Consultants, they can find everything. But our main website, which covers everything, is growingfarmers.com.
Okay,
So.
awesome. And I'll make sure to include all that on the notes page over at aarongregor.com. So, Michael, thank you for joining me today and talking about this. Obviously, not just the farmer side, but the podcasting side, because I think I love that. Here's what I love about your story is you're like, I still have 6 more things that I need to do or should be doing or, you know, yet your podcast is doing really well for you. So even if not everything is in place, it's still killing it for you. And I love those stories, that yes, there's still room for improvement, but it's doing really well. So you're approaching 1 million downloads. I think that's incredible. So congratulations and keep doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you very much for having me.